A brand new week with a brand new inspirational story. This week is definitely different because we are bringing you more of Eswatini's elite stories and how they can impact your life. And on today's episode, we have, or joining us rather, is of course Sandile Mdzebele, who is a public speaker and debate coach. And most importantly, he is a teacher at one of Eswatini's prestigious schools. He joins us today to tell us about his life story and how he became all of this. Sandile, welcome to Young Climber.
Thank you, Ngozi.
You know, the education matters the most, especially the early education in your story. Can we talk about that, your primary life and how it, impacted or what influence it had in the role that you decided to take of being a public speaker?
All right, thank you, Ngozi. I think first things first, I'll start with saying I'm born and bred in Baban, particularly Hilltop Zone 2. So I did my my primary rather at Sifunzani Primary School. I was honored and privileged to get that opportunity. I had a sponsorship that allowed me the opportunity to go there, which set a really strong foundation for eloquence and speaking. It is that background which allowed me to then later on pursue public speaking and debate. At the time, I don't really think my primary played a significant role in me pursuing public speaking and debate, but it just set what would then turn out to be the foundations that later would allow me to go into public speaking and debate.
And, you know, for your tertiary, you were at the University of Eswatini, where you majored in English and history. Nasafuza, you know, we have different aspirations, which is what I always say. Did you know that this is what you would be going for? And, you know, given your educational background when it came to high school and both primary, and, you know, was this your passion initially?
Actually, no. For most people, as it happens, that wasn't the case. So when I joined Boys High School, where I did my high school from 2008 until like 2012, I was dead set on being a pediatrician. I loved medicine. I thought that's what I'd be going into. But by the time I was in Form 3, you know, the science wasn't sciencing. So I decided to take a shift, and I had an English teacher that I admired quite a lot, Mr. Kele, and he sat me down and he spoke to me about pursuing a profession in law. So that was the first time I started thinking about, okay, perhaps, because he knew I was always a motor mouth. I could keep going for days. Yeah. So he was like, maybe you might want to pursue a career in law. When I entered the University of Swaziland in 2013, I actually enrolled under the LLB program. I studied law for about 3 years until I got bitten by the teaching bug, and then I made the shift to humanities. Yes, in part, the shift to teaching was definitely inspired by public speaking and debate. Because whilst I was a law student, I was coaching and training public speakers. So it was through that relationship with the youth, the youth at the time, I was also like only 18, 19. I realized that I had a passion for teaching and interacting with them, hence the change to humanities.
And then, you know, you later moved on to your career in education. What led you to pursue a career in education? And of course, how did you bag the role at Sifunzani High School?
All right, firstly, I think it might sound a bit pompous to say this, but honestly speaking, I don't think teaching is a career necessarily. It's more of a calling. It's something that honestly just, I couldn't shake it. As I had previously mentioned, I'd initially thought I was going down the law route, but teaching was just something that was persistent, that was there, that I eventually just found myself in, and certainly I don't regret it. As far as the Sifunzani job is concerned, it was from my previous exploits. So working with the Eswatini Schools Debate Association, I created relationships with teachers in and around most of the schools in Baban and even in Manzini. So when an opportunity or post was availed at Sifunzani High School, I was shortlisted. I went for the interview, and I guess they liked what they saw and heard because, yeah, the rest is history.
Yeah. And then you did mention the Eswatini Schools Debates Association. Can you talk about how you became a part of that and some of the key milestones during your journey as a part of the association?
All right, so the Eswatini Schools Debate Association, affectionately known as the ESDA, was started around 2008-2009 by primarily Waterford and Sifunzani High School. Those were the main schools pushing behind the initiative. I myself was in Form 2, I believe, at the time. So they came to the high school that I was in, Boys. They invited us for a workshop. And from the first time I saw, in particular, I remember, I'll always remember this, I saw Sandile Mdzebele speaking. And I fell in love with the confidence, the oratory, and I was just like, this this is what I want to do. So from that day onwards, I was part of the debating fraternity as a debater myself. I was fortunate enough in 2013 to be part of the team that went to represent the country in Turkey. When I came back from that, it so happened that every member of the team was moving on to greener pastures. Everyone was going to university, others got jobs out of the country, and I was really the only one left in the country with some debate experience. So the teachers who were left around wanted someone to try and help coach and establish the debate culture in the country, and I just kind of slid into the role one way or another. So since about 2013, I've been working as the head coach and adjudicator in the ESDA, trying to find my feet as well, and I've grown in that capacity, since then.
But there's one thing that we also spoke about, which is the Eswatini Schools Debate Association is no longer functional as we speak. But what are some of the measures that you are making to, resuscitate it? Because there is so much talent, so much passion for public speaking that is within schools in the Kingdom of Eswatini. What are your hopes or your future for the Debate Association?
Truthfully speaking, because I'm someone who's benefited from public speaking and debate, I cannot overstate how crucial and important it is, especially in this day and age when we have so many opportunities available for our young people. The world is literally, as we always say, their oyster. There are opportunities to go out and do anything. But in order for you to make the most of those opportunities, you need eloquence. You need to be able to think critically. You need to be able to express those thoughts as eloquently as possible. So I hope that we can resuscitate or bring back to life the association in any way or form, because what really hit us or set us aside was COVID. When COVID-19 struck, everything took a hit, right? And the online, we weren't really there as of yet to be able to have online debates and that type of thing. So we're still at a point where the culture needs to be re-ingrained in our high schools firstly, and then hopefully it can take root in the society at large. So personally, what I've tried to do, I work on a freelance basis, I'd say. Any school or any institution that wants to host a public speaking or debate tournament, I always make myself available to try and help with the coaching and the rules, structuring the tournaments, so that we can have the world standard of public speaking and debate and hopefully grow the culture from there.
And, with the whole public speaking thing, you are now a coach, but I'm pretty sure there's some people that contributed, maybe just a bit or influenced the decision that you took to be a public speaker. And most importantly, how has it influenced your decision, your approach to teaching and, of course, coaching? What have you learned and how are you using it now?
So I think there are a lot of people. If I were to start counting, I really wouldn't exhaust them. But I think top of the list would be the first crew or teammates that I had, which were several people from Waterford at the time. We had Oliver Mills, Wabantu Hlope, Fanele Mashwama, Sivuse Mbingo, and I was also part of that team. And then we had Mlungisi Dlamini, who I think is still teaching at Waterford. He was the first and only coach I've ever had in public speaking. So I hold him in a great degree of esteem and respect. What I've learned from all of them was, there was a time where public speaking, there was a facade of eloquence and twanging, and you know how people think if you sound a certain way, then you're a public speaker. What I learned from them was its substance. It's all about breaking down to the essence of what you're trying to say. The whole point of public speaking is to communicate the message to the next person. So if I come there and I'm flamboyant and I'm using all these complicated words and the message isn't landing, I failed in my task. The same principle applies to my teaching. That when I teach my students, I try to find the simplest way to distill whatever principle or theory we're dealing with, so that the whole point isn't for me to prove how much I've learned at university and show them how educated I am, but it's to explain as simply as possible what the essence of the concept is. So I think for me, the main thing that I've learned from public speaking is distilling things down to the essence of it. The second one, because as I'm sure you might have gotten a hint of it, I can be long-winded, I can talk for days, but public speaking has taught me the importance of time management, because you always have allocated time for your speeches. So you don't have all day to make your point, you only have 5 minutes. So you need to learn how to strategize, how to pick the most important elements and deliver them as quickly and as simply as possible.
I like that so much because, you know, it talks to how diverse public speaking can be. It's not just maybe khona lo public speaking in high school, but I got the passion till how far. But now I want to move on to some of the success stories that you carry with you of the people that you have carried, you know, in your career of public speaking. Can you share some of those with us?
Yo, so I might not look it, but it's been a while. I've been in the public speaking space for quite a while now. I think, as I said, around 2013 till now. So there've been quite a lot.
Yeah.
There've been so many that I may not be able to remember verbatim right now who and who, but off of the top of my head. So I'm happily married, just by the way.
Yeah.
And as it so happened, I met my wife through public speaking and debate. And she also is, I think, the last recipient of the prestigious Labotibeni Award. She's been, I believe, to Ghana. She was part of the IALE, Young African Leadership Academy.
Maybe we should have had your wife right next to
I think she should have been here for this one, yeah.
Yeah.
So she's definitely one of the closest stories to my heart, of course, for obvious reasons.
Okay.
But there are so many other young people. Just the other day I was on Facebook and I was seeing, I think, about 4 different students who, one way or another, had either coached or adjudicated at some point in time. Others are in universities in Russia, others are in universities in Europe. And I'm not claiming single-handedly that I made that happen, but I do know that the public speaking played a part in giving them the acumen, the competency to be able to go that way. So there are quite a lot, and there are also quite a few locally. There are students who are in our local institutions as well who are also thriving. I think I could also mention one that I know of is a journalist at, I believe, the Swazi Observer, a young man who was also part of the public speaking fraternity. So we here and there.
All righty.
Yes,
we are still talking to Sandile Mdzebele, who is a public speaker, debate coach, and of course a teacher. When we return, we unpack the story to continue to inspire you. Returning here on Young Climber is myself, Tabelo Dlamini, and today we are coming to you from Rehoboth Mountain Suites, which is located in the capital of the kingdom, Mbabane, at Mountain Inn. But we are still unpacking the story of Sandile Mdzebele, who is, I said, a public speaker, debate coach, and most importantly, a teacher. You know, the future of your children is in his hands. Can you welcome you back, Sandile?
Thank you for the pressure. It's fine.
Can we talk about what initially sparked your interest in debating, and of course what has kept you engaged in this field? Because you know you really need to like something to stick with it.
I think what really sparked the whole thing was just the natural acumen or leaning towards speaking. Someone who's always been opinionated. I've always liked voicing my opinions, so there was a natural bit of a bug for it.
Yeah.
But what's kept me in it is actually realizing that public speaking is more than just talking. When I got to it and I actually learned and realized that it's an art form, it's a discipline. It has certain rules and regulations, if you will, that guide what a good public speaking presentation is or isn't. And I've always been someone who's inclined to education. I've always loved learning. So when I realized that this thing isn't just about talking, it's also, there's an art to it, there's something to learn from it, that's what's kept me in it. Because for as long as I've been doing it, I still know there's so much more that I can learn, that I can do even better. So from working with so many different young minds, also I learned different styles and aspects of approaching public speaking, so I'm constantly learning myself.
And you know, sometimes someone may be interested in something, but you said it is a passion, it is a calling. But you know, I like speaking, but I don't know where this will go, but you know, you have to give it a try. What are some of the essential skills that young debaters need to have beyond the debating stage? What are some things that they need to possess, I mean, to be part of debating?
I think the first one is discipline.
Yeah.
We need to be disciplined in the sense that it takes time. It's a skill. So just like playing soccer, for instance, even if you're born with the natural flair for it, if you're not training, if you're not playing with the ball every now and then, you lose that natural touch. So you need the discipline to stick through with it, right? To follow the dictates of what your coaches say you have to do. Another one is definitely an open mind. The problem with public speaking and debate is that it's an intellectual pursuit. No one ever wants to be challenged intellectually. That's something that we take a great deal of pride in. But you need to be open to corrective criticism so that you can improve. If you're always thinking you're always right, then there's no room for the coach to come in and help you become a better public speaker or debater. So you need to be disciplined, open-minded, and willing to take in different perspectives. And then a very critical element of public speaking and debate is our listening skills.
Yeah.
Normally we have, especially in this day and age, fast-paced generation, we are listening to respond, not listening to understand. Everyone is always like, okay, I heard you say that, but I want to say this. But did you understand what I just said? Because if you listen and you take in what I'm saying, it might even change what you are about to say to me. So if we listen to understand, it then also helps us structure our own presentations.
And, you know, speaking of some of the key things in society, I think we need to talk about how public speaking and or debate has helped, you know, address some of the pertinent issues in our society. Because when you guys are debating, it seems like you're just talking about nothing. You're given certain topics. How do you think public speaking has helped address some of these issues in our society?
I think, especially in our somewhat turbulent political climate at times, where it's been very hard to distinguish between disrespect and voicing out opinions. Public speaking and debate has taught us the acumen of how do we respectfully say that this is perhaps not what should be happening. And also, excuse me, at the same time, voicing out the fact that we have what we call constructive criticism. And that comes through platforms such as public speaking and debate, which allow us to say that we don't think that said policy is in the best interest of the people. We don't think that this mandate is going to achieve what we want to achieve. And you voice your expressions, your opinions, why you don't think that's the case, without necessarily blurring the lines and getting to a place where it now seems like you're trying to be a political activist, if you will. It's got nothing to do with politics. It's really just a question of, are we in a space where we can freely and respectfully voice our differing opinions? Because I believe that's how we build a healthy, productive society. One in which we can share an exchange of ideas and opinions, and I can respect the difference in opinions. We don't always have to agree on things, but if you're saying something and it's valid, you have reasons why, I have to be able to look beyond my political stance and listen to the logic of what you're saying and appreciate it for the sense that it makes.
And I like that you made that point, you know, that sometimes to get your point across, it doesn't have to be, you know, all argumentative in a sense. But how do you help prepare your debate teams and for national and, of course, international competitions, given that, you know, sometimes there are cultural differences, background differences? How do you help prepare them?
I think one of the skills that we perhaps glossed over earlier was the ability to read the room. So that's a very important one, contextual understanding. Certain topics are uncomfortable, not necessarily because of the nature of the topic, but because of the room the topic is being discussed in. So you need to understand that, for instance, I always make an example to my students that if they're talking about teenage dating in a room full of their parents, it won't be the same as teenage dating in a room full of their peers. They'll speak more freely with their peers, they'll say certain things without thinking twice about it. But when their parents are now involved in the discussion, same points they're trying to make, but they have to now learn how to coach certain statements in a manner that will allow the parents to look to the substance of what's being said. Very often you find that, especially with our youth today, it's not what they're saying, but it's how they're saying it. So the message gets lost in translation, and we can't now pay attention to the principal issue. We now have to look at the disrespectful manner in which the issue was being presented. But if they learn how to present issues, taking away the disrespect that might be misconstrued, and they just respectfully bring about the issues, you leave whoever you're talking to with no choice but to pay attention to the principal issue. So I always try to make it abundantly clear to my students that let's read the room. Let's figure out who are we speaking to and why are we speaking to them. If we have an awareness of that, it will help us tailor the presentation to that specific audience.
But then does that not mean you adjusting a few words here and there, and it messes up the whole preparation process?
Well, it will definitely alter the delivery of the message, but not the message. The message itself remains, because let's remember the whole point is to get the principle across. We want to make, for instance, if I will use the teenage dating one that the teenagers like speaking about, in this day and age, they feel like teenage dating is fine. Public displays of affection are fine. And we say, okay, but why? And then they'll try in a crass manner at times and say things that will make us cringe and feel uncomfortable as the adults in the room. But if they were saying the same principle arguments in a manner that I'd be like, okay, that kid is making sense. So now their message, because the whole point of public speaking is for you to get heard. You want the person you're speaking to listen to what you're trying to say. So take away the cringe-worthy elements. Yes, it will influence the nature of the presentation, but for your presentation to be effective, remember, you're the one who wants to be heard. So for me to be heard, I have to tailor it to my audience.
And in your very own opinion, how can we improve the standard of education in Eswatini, especially in fostering critical thinking and oratory skills?
Fortunately, being a teacher, I'm somewhat exposed to the inner workings right now. And I think the first thing I have to say is our standard of education is actually quite high. We actually have a quite good literacy rate, even the standard of English. If you look at, speaking as someone who's born and bred in Baban, there was a point in time where there was a huge gulf between your private schools and your government schools. And even with the upper rank of government schools, because we've always had certain elite government schools where there'd be a huge gulf between them and the other government schools. But right now, honestly speaking, if you go into those schools from an eloquence perspective, the gulf is not that large anymore. So I think kudos to the government on that we have been trying to increase the disparity, or rather decrease the disparity between the schools that we have, and try and make sure that we have equal opportunities across the board. But then what we can do better, I think this is something that just comes to pretty much all sectors that we have. There's that old adage, there's no hurry in Swaziland. It seems to be seeping into all facets of our society. We are changing, but at times not quick enough, especially in this rapidly changing 21st century, where what was happening last month, last year, is no longer what we're doing now. We've moved on to the next, the better. So you find that at times we are a little slow in adapting the methods and the techniques and the technologies that we need to make sure that we're keeping up with the fast-paced world that we live in. So for me, I think we're doing the right things, but just not quick enough. So we just kind of need to pick up the pace so that we can stay at par with the people setting the pace.
And most importantly, I want to know, how do you think public speaking and debating can be integrated in schools and effectively in schools across the Kingdom of Eswatini? And one that I have for you, also in corporate spaces, because we do have young people that are required to make presentations, and we're still at a point where it's a bit questionable. And you're like, this can't be someone who's fully working in corporate. How do you think it can be integrated both in schools and, of course, in our corporate spaces?
I think to make the culture stick, competition is necessary. Competition is what really gives us some sort of carrot to look forward to, right? So even from a young student's perspective, and even into the corporate world, if we had established leagues, if you will, of public speaking and debate, where we know that we'll have annual tournaments where public speakers from this sector will come up on these topics. For instance, you have the financial sector, and there's so many different financial bodies that we have. So that we have topics relating to finances, and we want one representative from all of these financial sectors, and they know that every year they have to go there and show that they know their stuff, and they kind of just joust it out intellectually and they say everything. That will go a long way in helping build the culture, because it has to become a culture. But the culture without any incentive is very hard to establish. It's a problem we've had before. As I had mentioned, I've been part of public speaking and debate for a long time. And part of the problem we've seen is where you're training students, you can be training them every week, but if there's no competition, you see their enthusiasm wane as the weeks continue. So the first week they're very enthusiastic, but then they feel like, okay, we've learned, now we want to go test ourselves. Now we want to go and see just how much we've learned. So without any competition, without something tangible for them to go out there and say, we've proved ourselves against others to be the best, the culture just wanes. So if we can find support from any and all sectors to just kind of boost the competition within public speaking and debate, I think that would go a long way in ingraining the culture.
Or maybe you guys who know how to speak should hold trainings for those in corporate, so we can
Definitely.
Give
me a call.
See a better people speaking. But lastly, before we close off, what advice would you give to policymakers and educators who aim to empower the youth, through education and activities such as public speaking?
Wow, that's a big one. I think the first one is if they really intend to have an impact on the youth, they need the youth to be part of the policy making. We need more platforms that are going to allow the youth to have meaningful contribution to the policy establishment. We cannot have policies coming in, then after the fact we're asking for the opinion of the youth, because we've already imposed certain things on them, right? Of course, it's like being at home, if I were to use that setup, where as we grow older, we'll find our parents listening to us a little more. They're still the parent, they're still the authority, and they will tell you that in my house you still back by 6 o'clock. But if there's now room for negotiation and there's a reasonable reason why I'm asking for the time to be pushed to 6:30, because by the time I get to town there are kumbis, you're listening to the explanation, and then as an adult you can weigh the options and realize that, okay, this is what we need to do. Also because of the fast changing world that they live in. The world that I grew up in is nothing compared to the world that current teenagers are growing up in. Change is so rapid now. So if our policymakers are still making the policies based on a slow changing world, they're not going to be effective. We need the people who are cognizant of the fact that what was happening last week is not going to be happening next week. So we need a policy that's going to be able to shift mobility within our policies, because it takes a while. If you're speaking about something like governmental changes, it's not going to happen overnight. There are a lot of moving cogs that have to be placed in the right places, right? So if our policy, we put a policy in place today and we realize 6 months down the line we need to change it, it's going to be another 6 months before we see any change from that policy. So really trying to create platforms that help the youth be part of policy making and policy implementation, I believe will go a long way in helping bridge that gap.
All righty. Thank you so much, Sandile, for joining us today. We do hope that you will be an inspiration. You already are an inspiration to the youth, but we do hope that your story today will inspire someone Lole Makaya here in the Kingdom of Eswatini, and of course outside of the Kingdom of Eswatini. Big thank you.
Thank you, Ngozi, for having me.
All righty, that is it from Young Climber. Please do not forget to check out all our episodes on our YouTube channel on Eswatini TV. But from myself, Tabelo Jamini, and the rest of the team, it is good night and